you to know.
Marshay Robinson wasn't just another face in Cincinnati. She created her own brand, calling herself the baddest daddy, a mix between stud and daddy, a title she wore like armor. It wasn't just an image, it was her identity, her stage, her declaration of who she wanted the world to see. She carried herself like she had something to prove, but instead of strength, what came through was a dangerous cocktail of pride, anger, and bitterness. Her social media was proof of the storm inside her. One moment she was posting about heartbreak, swearing she was the victim of betrayal. The next, she admitted to being unfaithful herself, airing confessions that blurred the line between truth and performance. And then there were the darker messages, the ones that made people pause. Posts like, "Cheating on me when you know Cincinnati don't solve murder cases is wild to me." These weren't jokes. They were warnings, sharpened like knives, wrapped in the tone of someone who didn't just want to be heard, but feared. Marshay wanted to be recognized as more than a rapper, more than a hustler dabbling in real estate. She wanted to be admired, envied, respected. Yet behind the curated image of a go-getter was a person feeding on grudges, locking herself into a cycle of resentment, especially toward women, the very people she claimed to love. This is the tragic story of how obsession turned deadly. Before we dive in, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss future true crime stories we cover. Taralynn Bowers, or Taryn as most people called her, wasn't some lost soul drifting through life. She had personality. She had heart. She was the kind of woman you could describe as bright, funny, and impossible not to like. A daughter, a sister, and most importantly a mother to 4 kids who loved her more than anything. She had been knocked down plenty of times, but she always found a way to get back up. Life kept testing her, but she refused to quit. By early 2025, she was determined to do better. She wanted stability, peace, and the kind of love that didn't come with betrayal. For once, she was putting herself first, not just for her, but for the 4 little ones who needed her strong. When she met Marshay Robinson, she thought maybe she had finally found that. On the outside, Marshay seemed like she had it together. Confident, outspoken, and the type who looked like she wasn't going to play games. To Taryn, that sounded like safety. It sounded like loyalty. So she gave her a chance. Her family tried to be supportive too. They didn't want to stand in the way of her happiness. When Taryn told them she was happy with Marshay, they were glad for her. They even said Marshay seemed like someone who wouldn't play about her. Taryn laughed and replied, "She don't play at all." At the time, it felt like reassurance. But in hindsight, those words would become the most haunting understatement of her life. At first, things between Taryn and Marshay looked good. They were posting pictures together, smiling on dates, showing off the kind of happiness most people want to believe in. There was laughter, promises of forever, and that glow people have when a new relationship feels fresh. For a moment, Taryn thought she finally had the kind of love she'd been waiting for. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. The laughter turned into arguments. Arguments that didn't just end with words, but carried a sting that left marks far deeper than anyone could see on a screen. What started as small disagreements grew louder, harsher, and eventually violent. Marshay's temper wasn't just sharp, it was explosive, and Taryn was often left trying to pick up the pieces, convincing herself things would get better. On the outside, most people brushed it off. To them, it looked like drama, just another messy couple airing out their business. Some even called it a toxic merry-go-round, the type of relationship where one day it's love and the next it's chaos. But they didn't see what Taryn was really going through. They didn't hear the threats whispered when the cameras were off. They didn't feel the fear that followed her every time she thought about leaving. And yet, she stayed. Each time things exploded, there was always a moment after where Marshay would pull her back in with apologies, with promises to change, with declarations of love that sounded real enough to believe. It became a cycle. Breakups followed by reconciliations, pain followed by the hope that maybe this time would be different. For Taryn, it was exhausting. For Marshay, it was control. And together, they were heading toward a point where nothing could save them from what was coming next. August 17th, 2025, was supposed to be different. It was Taryn's birthday, and birthdays always meant something to her. No matter how hard life had been, She believed in marking the day, if not for herself, then for her children, who deserved to see their mother happy. That night, she walked into Jeff Ruby's steakhouse dressed to be noticed, her hair and makeup flawless, her smile lighting up the room. Friends and family gathered, ready to celebrate the woman who had fought so hard to keep her life steady. On the surface, it was everything she wanted. The table was full of laughter, the smell of expensive steak filled the air, and glasses were raised in her honor. Cameras flashed as she posed with her cake, smiling for photos that would later be shared online. In those pictures, she looked radiant, surrounded by people who loved her. It was the kind of moment most people would scroll past and think, she's living her best life. But what the camera didn't catch was the quiet strain underneath it all. Mare was there too, seated close by, her presence heavy in ways words couldn't describe. Outwardly, she played the role, smiling when the group smiled, lifting a glass when everyone toasted, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that cut through the room. Taralynn knew it. She felt it, yet she refused to let it ruin her night. She laughed louder than usual, hugged tighter, and moved through the evening as if nothing was wrong. For those few hours, she chose to put on a show of joy. She wanted her children to remember their mother glowing on her birthday, not weighed down by conflict. She wanted her friends to see her laughing, not shrinking. She wanted to believe, if only for one night, that things could still turn around. When the dinner ended, people left with the impression of a woman blessed and loved. They didn't know that under those smiles, the tension had only grown stronger. What looked like togetherness was nothing more than a fragile mask, hiding the storm that was building just beneath the surface. That birthday wasn't just a celebration. It was the last flicker of calm before everything unraveled. August 30th, 2025, started off lighthearted. It was one of those nights Taralynn had been looking forward to, a pajama party with her girlfriends. The kind of night where the weight of responsibilities could be set aside, at least for a few hours. Everyone showed up in colorful pajamas, music played, and the laughter was genuine. They danced around the living room, joked about old memories, and toasted to nothing more than being together and alive. For Taralynn, it was a chance to breathe, to let her guard down, to just be a woman among friends instead of the mother who always had to carry everything on her shoulders. For a while, it felt like pure fun, carefree and warm, the type of night that fills you with relief because it reminds you that life isn't always heavy. But then Mare showed up. The moment she walked through the door, the atmosphere shifted. Her energy wasn't light or playful. It was sharp, heavy, and impossible to ignore. The music didn't sound the same. The laughter that had been echoing only minutes before started to fade. Taralyn's friends noticed it immediately. The mood of the room fell flat as Mare stood there with a glare that said more than words ever could. What was supposed to be a girls' night quickly turned into tension. Mare wasn't screaming or making a scene, but her presence alone was enough to silence the room. Every joke seemed to die halfway out of someone's mouth. Every dance slowed down, and suddenly the carefree vibe was gone. Her anger lingered in the air like smoke, and no one knew how to clear it. The party didn't last much longer after that. One by one, the energy drained out of the room until it was obvious the night was over. Friends who had come ready to laugh into the early hours left with uneasy glances, whispering to each other about how quickly the fun had evaporated. Taralynn, trying to salvage something of the evening, joined a smaller group for an after-party at a friend's house. They sat around, talked quietly, and tried to shake off the uncomfortable turn the night had taken. But even there, the weight of Mare's presence lingered in Taralyn's mind. It was as if her birthday had been the last glimpse of joy, and this pajama party was proof that whatever happiness she tried to hold on to would always be shadowed by Mare's anger. Eventually, the night ended. Taralynn gathered herself, said her goodbyes, and began the trip home. What she didn't realize was that this would be her last night alive. After the pajama party fizzled out, Taralynn and Mare didn't head straight home. Instead, they lingered at one of Mare's friends' houses. The energy was different, heavy, uncomfortable, but Taralynn stayed, trying to keep the peace. Hours ticked by until the early morning, when the two finally decided to leave. What should have been just another night out with friends was already weighed down by tension that followed them through the door. Back at home, Things unraveled quickly. The fragile calm they had carried from the party shattered as soon as they stepped inside. Arguments that had been simmering for weeks erupted again, sharper and louder than before. Voices rose, anger spilled out, and the house became a battlefield of words. Taralynn, exhausted and drained, had finally had enough. This time, she didn't just sit through it, she walked out. That moment mattered. It was the first real step she had taken to protect herself, to break free from the cycle everyone begged her to escape. For once, she wasn't just surviving the storm, she was leaving it behind. But Mare wasn't ready to let her go. The call started almost immediately. Her voice, once fueled by rage, softened into something almost pleading. She promised calm. She promised rest. She promised they could settle things like adults. Those words hit Taralynn in the one place she was most vulnerable, her desire for peace. She wanted to believe it was true. She wanted to believe Mare had finally calmed down. So she went back. The moment she stepped through the door, it was already too late. There was no calm, no reconciliation, no time to prepare. A single shot rang out, sudden and final. The bullet struck Taralynn in the head, cutting her life short before she could even speak another word. She collapsed where she stood. No warning, no chance to defend herself. Just silence. In seconds, a mother of 4 was gone. The woman who had fought so hard to rebuild her life, who only wanted love and stability, had been taken in the most violent way imaginable by the person she trusted enough to come back to. The house that once echoed with arguments and promises now held nothing but stillness. News of Tarynn's death tore through Cincinnati like a wound. Her family couldn't believe it at first. It felt unreal, like someone had spoken the worst words possible and expected them to be accepted as truth. A mother of 4, taken in seconds, left behind children who would wake up to a world that no longer had her in it. Her family gathered quickly, clinging to one another, their grief spilling into every corner of their lives. The apartment complex where it happened became a place they could hardly look at without feeling sick, but they refused to let her memory fade quietly. The very next day, they released balloons into the sky, colors drifting upward as voices cried out her name. Children held the strings tightly before letting go, their little hands empty, their eyes watching as the balloons disappeared, symbols of a mother they would never see again. It wasn't just grief, it was fury. Her sister Adrienne couldn't hold back her anger. She spoke to reporters with fire in her voice, then turned to social media, where her posts were raw, unfiltered, and heartbreaking. She didn't just mourn, she exposed. She wrote that Mare had always been trigger-happy, that this wasn't a mistake, that you don't accidentally shoot someone the second they walk back into a room. She wanted the world to understand that this was no moment of passion gone too far. It was a choice. Adrienne didn't stop there. She peeled back the layers of Mare's carefully crafted image. The self-proclaimed realtor, the woman who bragged about hustle and success, was painted instead as a fraud, someone living behind a mask while dragging Taralynn into chaos. She pointed to jealousy, to resentment, to a life built on deception. Her words cut deep, especially when she admitted what haunted her most. She never got to hold her sister one last time. While Taralynn lay on someone's floor, lifeless, Adrienne was forced to stand outside, unable to touch her, unable to whisper goodbye. She wrote that all she wanted was to wrap her arms around her sister, to bring her home, to keep her safe. But that chance was stolen, and the only thing left in its place was a heavy, burning grief that would never leave her. And while balloons floated in the sky, the weight of her absence sank deeper into the lives of everyone who loved her. It didn't take long for police to act. Mare was arrested and charged with murder, her face no longer plastered across social media with bravado, but staring into booking cameras with the look of someone whose power had slipped away. The same woman who once called herself the baddest daddy now sat in custody, her swagger stripped down to silence. When the case first entered the courtroom, prosecutors painted a clear picture. They argued that Taralynn never had a chance to defend herself. She didn't walk into that apartment armed with a gun or any kind of threat. The only thing she carried was mace, something meant for protection, not violence. They emphasized how quickly the shooting happened, how there was no time for a fight, no struggle, no excuse for pulling the trigger. To them, this wasn't self-defense, it was execution. Mare's defense tried to spin a different story. Her attorney entered a plea of not guilty, claiming she had acted in fear, that the shooting was about self-preservation. They pushed the idea that there was more to the story, that Mare had reasons buried beneath the surface that the court hadn't yet heard. But no matter how they phrased it, the facts remained. Taralynn was unarmed, and Mare fired without hesitation. The question of bond became a battle in itself. The defense asked for leniency, suggesting Mare could be released on $100,000 at 10%. They argued she wasn't a flight risk, that she had lived in the community her whole life and had no criminal history. They wanted the court to see her as someone who made a mistake, not a monster. But the judge saw the danger that everyone else already felt. There would be no bond. Mare wasn't going home, not this time. The gavel came down with finality, keeping her behind bars while the case moved forward. Outside the courtroom, Taralyn's family refused to be silent. They had already lost too much, and they weren't about to watch her story get twisted into a lie. They demanded justice, every word laced with both grief and fury. To them, it was simple. No plea, no excuse, no defense could erase the fact that Taralynn was lured back into that apartment and never walked out alive. For the family, accountability wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. It was about making sure that the woman who claimed love but delivered death was held responsible for every tear, every sleepless night, and every child left without their mother. And as Mare sat behind bars, stripped of her persona and waiting for trial, the weight of her actions hung over everyone, especially the family who would never stop fighting for Taralyn's name. Taralyn's story ended far too soon. She was only beginning to step into the life she had worked so hard for. Nursing school was just weeks away. She talked about it constantly, about finally building a career that would provide stability for her children. Her days were filled with planning, uniform fittings, books, late-night talks about how she wanted to heal and care for others. But those dreams never had the chance to come alive. Instead, her children are left with memories, trying to piece together love from photographs and stories told by relatives. No more bedtime hugs. No more birthday surprises. No more hearing their mother's voice cheering them on at school events. The loss is heavy, and it will follow them into every stage of their lives. While Taralyn's children learn to live with absence, Mare's world has collapsed into silence. The same woman who once flaunted her image online, who filled timelines with bold words and staged confidence, now sits behind concrete walls, powerless. The persona she projected, a picture of control and dominance, was stripped away in a matter of hours. Behind bars, there are no followers, no audience, no applause, only the echo of what she did. And in the end, that's the truth about this case. Mare's version of love was never really love at all. It was possession. It was control. It was violence disguised as devotion. And the cost of that illusion was a young mother's life. Subscribe to the channel, share this video with someone, and join us as we continue to shed light on the lives lost to intimate partner violence.